Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday, June 19th, 2024, and I'd like to do my own Juneteenth commemoration address. I have some passionate opinions about this federal holiday that I have been compelled to express. The definition of Juneteenth, as you can see, is a holiday celebrated on June 19 to commemorate the emancipation of enslaved people in the U.S. The holiday was first celebrated in Texas, where on that date in 1865, in the aftermath of the Civil War, enslaved people were declared free under the terms of the 1862 Emancipation Proclamation. So, I'm just compelled to express the fact that I feel like as a people, the descendants of slaves in the United States are constantly being gaslighted by our political leaders, giving us very insignificant um, and irrelevant federal holidays that do not address what happened to our people and our ancestors. I think it is highly insensitive, it is immoral that this country can give us a federal holiday in the hopes that we will go spend money on buying stuff to barbecue and, you know, banners and t-shirts and everything is done so we can continue to be the largest consumers in this country. And no one wants to address the elephant in the room, which is reparations for the descendants of the enslaved people that built this nation. So today I'm just compelled to say when and ask my people the question, when are we going to have had enough of being gaslighted in this country? And what I mean by being gaslighted is to ignore our needs right now, today, in this present moment, to dismiss what happened to our ancestors, the horrific and inhumane treatment of our ancestors during slavery, Jim Crow, and up until today. It has not waned. Okay. And when do we say enough is enough? We don't want a federal holiday so we can spend money to line the pockets of corporations who are not owned by our people. When are we going to say that what we want is for the country to alleviate itself of its first sin, which was the enslavement of human beings, the mistreatment of human beings for over 2.5 centuries? When do we say it is time for us to be compensated? Right now, we are in an election year. We have two old white men running for office. Whether you have decided to vote for Biden, who was the author of the 1994 crime bill, which enlarged the privately owned prison complex with black and brown men, women, and children, or Donald Trump, who is now has 34 felony convictions. On top of that, he was impeached by the House while he was in office. On top of that, we have very horrible statements made by this man about a man that is invalid. Horrible statements made by this man about what he can do as a wealthy man to women. I'm saying all that to say this, and I do not dislike Donald Trump. Let me make that clear. But I do want us as the descendants of slaves, the descendants of prisoners of war. I want us to recognize that the way we are being gaslit is because white men still can do whatever they want to, and everybody else has to act like it never happened. Had Barack Obama, and I'm no fan of Barack Obama, but had Barack Obama done any of the things that these two men have done, we've also seen Joe Biden on camera doing some very, not so kosher things with children. Let's just call a thing and let's stop playing games, okay? So we have all of these men doing certain things that would have been completely inappropriate had they been done by candidate or President Barack Obama. So much so that the descendants of slaves would be so embarrassed had President Obama or candidate Obama did any of these things. Maybe you all forgot when Mark uh, Rubio and then candidate Donald Trump were literally arguing during a presidential debate about the size of their male members based on the size of their hands. Yes, this happened all before our eyes. Now, just imagine for a minute, had Barack Obama been arguing, doing a presidential debate with the other candidates about the size of his male member as a black man. Do we really think that man would have been elected in office? Because the first thing the descendants of slaves would have done is all been outraged that this man didn't have better decorum. He did not know how to conduct himself in such an arena to deserve the presidency. But somehow, white Americans overlooked all of these things with Donald Trump and put him in the White House. Now, help me understand why we are missing the obvious message again, which is white men in this country can do anything and remain relevant, even achieve the highest office in the land. When every black person knows, had President Barack Obama engaged in any of these things, we'd all still be walking around with paper bags on our heads and calling it a fashion statement. We'd be that embarrassed. Okay? But the Juneteenth, I pray that we get this message on this Juneteenth. And unlike our ancestors, it not take 2 years for you to get this message, because then it will be too late. We are in deep trouble as a people, as a group in this country. We need to learn one thing from white Americans, and that is how to coalesce around an issue and not deviate from it until we get results. Let me give you an example. Back in 2003, the Dixie Chicks, they the Dixie Chicks had a controversy with then President George Bush, and they were the number one selling girl group in the country at that time, and country and western girl group, number one. And as it reads here, the Dixie Chicks comments on George W. Bush. In March 2003, the American country band, the Dixie Chicks, publicly criticized President George W. Bush, triggering a backlash. At a concert in London during their Top of the World tour, the lead singer, Natalie Maines, said the Dixie Chicks were ashamed Bush was from the same state as them and they did not support the imminent invasion of Iraq. The Dixie Chicks were one of the most popular American country acts at the time, After the statement was reported by the British newspaper The Guardian, it triggered a backlash from American country listeners who were mostly right wing and supported the war. Dixie Chicks were blacklisted. Listen, by many country radio stations, received death threats, and were criticized by other country musicians. Sales of their music and concert tickets declined, and they lost corporate sponsorship. A few days later, Maines issued an apology saying her remark had been disrespectful. She rescinded the apology in 2006, saying she felt Bush deserved no respect. We all know what happened. We all know the invasion of Iraq was wrong. We all know that. We all know they didn't have any weapons of mass destruction. We all know this. But yet and still, white Americans coalesced around this issue until they destroyed the Dixie Chicks. I'm asking my people today, the descendants of enslaved people, when do we coalesce around an issue and don't budge until we get some results? We are in an election year, and all we're about to hear on every news station repeatedly is the black vote. The black vote. Here we are supposed to be a minority in this country, 14% of the population, but all of a sudden we are the group that decides the presidency. We are the group that everyone wants our vote. I've never heard, I'm 60 years old, I've never heard the Asian American vote. I've never heard the Italian American vote. I've never heard the Chinese American vote. I've never heard these things, but it's always the African American or black vote, the descendants of slaves. What are they going to do in this election cycle? And I propose on this Juneteenth, June 19, 2024, that we appoint our own head of what we want to present to these presidential candidates. I have my own candidate that I believe would be the best candidate for our people. I will put that in the comments of this video because I wouldn't want it to take away from what that candidate is currently working on and what I'm saying. But I'll put my who I believe we should support in the comments of the video. You can go there. But I say anybody that is running for office should get a list of what we expect that candidate to do while in office in order to get our vote and have them to sign off on it. This proposal from the descendants of enslaved people. This is what we propose to these candidates. Now, either they will agree to it or they won't. But if they agree to it, then we need to have a block vote and block our vote for that candidate. Block our vote for that candidate because now we have some actual demands that we are making. And please, people, I'm talking about us unifying around an issue that will soon be at our doorsteps. We have rents that are going through the roof and are out of control. We have property taxes that are out of control. We have auto insurance and home insurance pricing that is out of control. All of these things have increased by huge percentages, and no one's salary has increased. No one is getting a 40% raise on their jobs. Okay, so it's time for us as a people to stop playing games and doing silly and continuing to be minstrels, doing silly things on TikTok so we can get views. I guess that's how people are making money. I feel you have to do what you have to do as long as it's not illegal. But I would say this, it's time for us to get what is due us. Did you all know that uh the the victims of the 9/11, victims of 9/11 were compensated? Victims of 9/11 were compensated. It's called the September 11 Victim Compensation Fund. Here it is. They were compensated. The September 11 Victim Compensation Fund, commonly known as the VCF, was a U.S. government fund that was created by an act of Congress shortly after the September 11 attacks in 2001. The purpose of the fund was to compensate the victims of the attacks and their families with the quid pro quo of their agreement not to file lawsuits against the airline corporations involved, such as American Airlines and United Airlines. The VCF functions similar to the Social Security Administration, and that part of the annual U.S. federal budget is set aside for the specific purpose of paying out victims, although this process is heavily regulated. Medical treatments for several respiratory diseases, including asthma and sleep apnea, as well as for all forms of cancer are covered by the VCF. People, this was a 1 day event. Our ancestors suffered for more than 2.5 centuries under the most horrific and horrendous, unimaginable, inhumane treatment ever known to mankind in chattel slavery. These people had a 1 day event and were compensated. Let's look up the Oklahoma City bombing. Let's see where they compensated. And I'm not saying these people didn't suffer, and I'm not saying that the compensation wasn't um relevant, uh wasn't justified. I'm not saying that at all. I feel for the people that went through these things. Um but people, if the Oklahoma City bombing compens see they were oh, they were compensated. Okay, I might be typing wrong. Okay, so they were compensated for the Oklahoma City bombing. Let's look this up. Let me just get back here. Hold on just a moment. Um, so they were compensated. Let me just get to it. Okay. Now, so $7 billion. Okay, compensation wanted for victims of bombing. They were compensated. There's some 10 $10 million left. Okay. But there is a trust for them, and millions of dollars still sit in the bank designated for victims of the Oklahoma City bombing. These are donations that were set aside in 1995 to help the bombing victims and their families, but those same victims say getting that money continues to be difficult. A decade ago, it was revealed there was still 10 million in the fund, even though victims said they were told there was little or no money left. 3 years later, trustees from Oklahoma City Community Foundation voted to move the money to a private trust, which doesn't have to reveal how much money is in the fund, who is getting it, or how much they are charging to manage it. But there is a fund for the Oklahoma City bombing victims. That's all I wanted to bring to your attention. So these were 1 day events. There's never been any compensation for the first domestic terrorism act on U.S. soil, which would have been the Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street bombing. We still have a victim who's 110 years old, still no compensation for her being the last remaining victim of the Tulsa, Oklahoma City bombing. She just made 110 years old the other day. Um, so no compensation for them. The Tulsa Race Massacre, also known as the Tulsa Race Riot or the Black Wall Street Massacre, was a 2 day long white supremacist terrorist massacre that took place between May 31st and June 1st, 1921, when mobs of white residents, some of whom had been appointed as deputies and armed by city government officials, attacked residents and destroyed homes and businesses of the Greenwood district in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The event is considered one of the worst incidents of racial violence in American history. The attackers burned and destroyed more than 35 square blocks of the neighborhood at the time, one of the wealthiest black communities in the United States, colloquially known as Black Wall Street. So, if whites want to come into the um, in the comments and say, we're tired of you all begging, nobody today ever owned a slave, none of you have ever been a slave. But let me say this to you all, because you're ignorant and you're unlearned. You don't even know your own history. That's why they're working so hard for you not to have to face it in these schools, because the insurance industry today is one of the most lucrative industries in this country because of slavery. Okay, you all enjoy some of the benefits you enjoy right down to today because of slavery. You see, the worst and the most egregious welfare program was 200 and some odd years, almost 300 years of slavery, when white people got to sit on their butts and do nothing, while black people did all the work and got paid nothing for it. See, at least you all complain about the entitlements, and we're tired of giving you all entitlements, and we're tired of the food stamps. When white, it's known that white people get more food stamps than blacks. But the real entitlements went to white slave owners, you see, and their families who were able to pass down and enjoy generational wealth, which is what has been denied us consistently. And yes, I'm not saying that we don't have black people in this country that are wealthy. We don't have black people in this country that are doing really well. That's true. But as a group, and I'll give you all one last example and then I'll end this address, trying to keep it under 30 minutes. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. I left New Orleans in August of 2000. Katrina hit August of 2005. When Katrina hit and I'm watching my city underwater, I was devastated. But I was doing a business at that time, an employee benefit business, and I already had some meetings scheduled that week. I had a meeting scheduled with a minister over a church who also had a school attached to the church with several employees, and he was interested in what I was doing, set up an appointment, and I went in his office the Wednesday after Katrina, and he got a phone call from somewhere in Mississippi, and he put the call on speaker, and the caller, and he said, "What can I do?" And they said, "Well, they're really getting all of the funding. Seems like it's going to go to New Orleans, but we've been hit hard here too, and we got people here that really need help." And he said, "Well, I tell you what, I'll get $1 million check in the mail to you and overnight it to you later today." And he said, "Oh, thank you so much. I knew you'd help." Hung up the phone. He got back to my presentation, and I'm blown away because I'm like, my goodness, a million. This man just like that was gonna write $1 million check. Um, and what it did for me was it let me know when you have resources and institutions in place, you're not as in trouble as when you have nothing in place, when there is an event, a catastrophic event, and you have no means to get help to your people. That was an example for me to say, and it did lead me to go back home and contact my own religious organization and have them set up a compensation fund for the victims of Katrina, and that was done based on me hearing that, the overhearing that conversation. But I'm just saying, you have to be able to have the means to, and a lot of our people who do have money, their hands are tied behind their backs because they can't do anything in any real way to help their people without them getting a whole lot of backlash and maybe losing corporate sponsors or whatever the case may be. So I'm saying that we need our elder, Dr. Claude Anderson, along with his partner, Dr. Boyce Watkins. Neither of these men know me. Neither of these men have talked to me, but I've watched them for years. I know their passion, I know their love, and I know their integrity for their towards their people. We need a points document for what we need to present to the candidates running for president, whether they be Democrat, Republican, or independent. And they need to sign off on this document that they will do everything in their executive power as president to address our requests and our needs based on that document. This is what we need, people. We don't need a holiday. These holidays are gaslighting. We need real, tangible methods of being able to repair the damage. And absolutely we need reparations. And I'll leave you all with this. I was standing working one day, and a gentleman who was definitely, right wing, he was like, I'm so sick of all of these people, and all they want is handouts and all that. My family worked hard to have what they have and to build the business that they have. And why should people who worked for what they have to turn around and give what they worked for the people who don't work? I said, well, sir, you just came up with the best argument for reparations for the descendants of enslaved people, because our people did all the work while other people benefited from our ancestors' labor. They were able to pass that wealth down to for generation after generation, and our ancestors did all the work. So sir, thank you for giving me the most profound argument for reparations to be paid to the descendants of enslaved people here in the United States that you could have ever given me. And that all the blood drained from that man's face. But that is the best argument. Yes, the people who did all the work did not get paid, and the people who did no work got got richly compensated until they made them wealthy. We need reparations, and we need them now. So this is my Juneteenth address. You can put whatever comment you want below this video. I will not be arguing with small-minded people. I'm going to tell you that now. I do not intend to have arguments with people. You can vote for whoever you want to vote for. But I tell you what, we can revisit this in 2 years. And if we don't come together and unify over this issue, regardless, let's stop fighting about who's in charge, who going to hold them. What? We need to stop all that. And we need to let this man, Dr. Claude Anderson, who paid the dues to tell us this is what we should ask for of these candidates. And if they can't deliver on this, you will never get our vote again. You can forget it. But that's what we have to come up with. Every other group comes up with demands for what they want. We're the only group that go vote, and our situation keeps getting worse and worse. This is 60 years, almost 61 years after the March on Washington. People, it's time for America to pay its biggest and longest outstanding debt. Thank you all.